What's up, guys? This is Coach Grant with First Down Training, and today we're going to be talking about some of the most common bad habits that youth quarterbacks will have. So we're going to be comparing youth quarterbacks' motions to NFL quarterback motions and how youth quarterbacks can take away some things from these top throwers and apply it to their actual game to solve those problems. So I hope this video helps you guys out. Hope it could teach you a few new things. But also, fellas, if you're a QB and you would like to train with us this offseason, we are coming out to 15 more states across the country for 2-day-long QB and wide receiver training camps. Next up on our camp tour, and you guys get more information on this if you check out the very first link in the description below. Our next camp is going to be in San Francisco, California. That camp is completely sold out, but then we'll be coming out to Miami, Las Vegas, Charlotte, Portland, Dallas, Nashville, Chicago, Buffalo, Atlanta, Houston, Philly, Detroit, Boise, and Los Angeles. So again, fellas, very first link in that description below. If you would like to sign up to train with us, let's get started. So one of the biggest problems that a lot of youth quarterbacks have is going to be something called an overstride. So like I said, we're going to be showing a problem from a youth quarterback, actual film from a youth quarterback, like I would say ages like 13 and below. And then we're going to compare it and contrast it to an NFL quarterback's motion and how you guys can actually learn from it. So this first clip is going to be the dreaded overstride. So many young quarterbacks have this problem where they take this really long front stride. It takes forever to get this front foot in the ground. And honestly, I think it's just a lack of coaching, but also developing bad habits early and a lack of strength, right? So I'm going to play this full speed and then we'll break it down. Now, listen, I want to be very clear. You could probably get very good at a bad habit. I was one of those kids, right? I was always a baseball player when I was younger, so I always had that like baseball type stride, right? And when I was throwing the youth ball and I was throwing against maybe not the greatest competition in the world, similar to this example, I would have a lot of success because I could just kind of muscle the ball there, right? But as soon as you move up to that high school ball, as soon as you start playing with defenders who are a little bit faster, sooner or later, people are going to catch up to you, and those bad habits are not going to fly. And also, for a lot of kids, sometimes it's too late. They have so many reps of doing the same thing over and over again, and because the ball's getting there, because the result ultimately is good, when they get to that high school level or a faster level, it's almost too late. They've had 10,000 plus reps of a bad habit, and it is so hard to break that bad habit. So that's the purpose of this video. How can we eliminate this type of habit early on and so the quarterback long term has better results, right? So this overstride, like I said, it's from a couple of things. A lot of time it's from strength, right? So to be able to get the ball downfield, a lot of quarterbacks were taught that you need to try to push off of this back foot. Pretend like you are pushing off of a pitcher's rubber, push off the inside arch, and when you push off of that back foot, sometimes what that causes, your back leg will look like this, obviously, and that can cause that very long stride. Now, why is the long stride a problem? Long stride is a problem because the longer it takes for your front foot to get down in the ground, the slower your releases. It is physically impossible to throw from the pocket without your front foot making contact with the ground. So the longer it takes for this to get down, the longer this takes, right? Your release is just slowed way down the longer that stride can take, right? It's not a fluid motion. If you get that front foot down in the ground quick, those hips can fire quickly and the ball can come through, which kind of brings me to my next point. The longer this front stride is, the wider your base gets. And we're going to talk about a wide base in a second here in this video. But when you take this really long step, look where this quarterback's feet are. They're very wide outside of his body frame. So when your feet are wide outside your body frame, it is physically impossible to rotate fully with your hips, right? And so watch what happens to this quarterback's front leg. I bet you it locks out, right? Front leg extends, front leg locks out, everything pops straight up in the air because he can't rotate from those hips. You physically can't withstand that force when this foot is super far outside your body frame. So essentially what happens is you are throwing the ball all arm, and it causes a lot of bad habits like a lean out with your head and a pull down of your front elbow. Because as quarterbacks, to get the ball there, we're rotational athletes, right? When you throw a football, that's why so many quarterbacks spend so much time working on their rotator cuff, doing different exercises to strengthen their rotator cuff, because we're rotational athletes. You're either going to rotate at one of two spots. You're either going to rotate at your hips or you're going to rotate at your shoulders and with your upper body. Now, there's one way to rotate that takes pressure off the elbow, the shoulder, and the arm entirely, and that's your lower body. But when your feet are super wide outside your body frame, you physically cannot rotate. You could try it right now. Just stand up in your room or wherever you're watching this and put your feet really wide outside your shoulders like this and try to rotate your hips. You will not be able to. Your front hip will almost like lock out. Now move your feet inside your shoulder frame and try to do that. it's very easy to rotate. So if you guys can do that and have that base that's in, and I'm not saying to be like right next to each other with your feet, you want some kind of width, a little bit of width, but I would say inside of your shoulder frame. If you can stay inside your shoulder frame, you have a much cleaner path of rotation with your hips, and that takes a lot of pressure off of the arm. So the reason why, again, you see so many young quarterbacks do this is they have that bad habit of pushing. They think that they need to push to be able to get the ball there. And reps upon reps of younger kids throwing too far. Guys, if I get a quarterback who's under the age of probably 11 years old that we train, we do not throw any deeper than 15 yards. I see clips all the time of youth quarter. And how often does a 10-year-old have to throw past 20 yards? Honestly, right? I see all the time of these kids training to throw deep, and they have terrible form. And I don't blame them because they're freaking 80 pounds, probably less than that, probably like 60 pounds, and they're trying to drive this ball downfield, but they have this big head lean, they have this big stride, and guys, you got to understand you're practicing bad habits. If you do 1,000 reps of a bad habit, essentially that becomes the way you throw the ball, right? Especially if you do 10,000 reps. They say it takes 10,000 reps to break a bad habit. Imagine 10,000 reps of a bad habit. You're going to be setting yourself so far back. A lot of the times, I think it's just a lack of knowledge. I think coaches don't have the knowledge of stride length, hip rotation, mechanics, etc. So we can't fall into these bad habits, fellas. I think it's a lot, like I said, strength, improper coaching of pushing off the back foot, and then obviously a lot of reps of having this exact problem. We don't want this to be a problem for forever. Maybe you have a bad habit right now, but we want to be able to fix the problem. So how can you fix that problem? So there's one coaching point that I have seen a lot of success with, and we're going to kind of highlight this from Anthony Richardson with my quarterbacks. I'll do two things with guys. What I'll do is I'll have them throw, and I'll put a circle of cones around their feet. So I will literally set up maybe 10 to 12 cones and just put a big circle. QBs stand in the circle, and they have to throw. So it kind of forces them to have that shorter stride length, and their hips rotate through. Now, obviously, when we're throwing routes and they're at practice, they're not going to be able to set up a cone of circles. So what's a coaching cue that you can think about to get that front stride to get in the ground? And this is a good example here from Anthony Richardson. I tell my quarterbacks to think about stepping down. Don't think about stepping to the target. I tell them to step down. So you see how Anthony Richardson is base, right? He's got his weight loaded on his back leg, very similar to the last example, but a clear difference of that stride length. You see how that front foot is making contact with the ground now. His feet are inside of his shoulder frame. Watch how this front foot doesn't lock out. He's able to just rotate through and keep a slight semi-bend because his feet are inside of his shoulder frame. He's able to use his hips. He's able to use his core because that stride was shortened, right? Now, like I said, so many quarterbacks have been taught, and again, we've all been taught this, like if you guys all had like a baseball background, step to the target. You want to step, then throw, right? You're a pitcher. You want to push off the mound. You have this real long stride. It's a different type of motion, fellas, pitching and playing quarterback. So I tell my quarterbacks, how quickly can you make your toes make contact with the ground? And you want to step downward. If you guys can think about stepping down, not stepping to, I think you will have a much quicker stride, and that will time up better with your throwing sequence. Because again, throwing the football is all about being able to generate torque. Torque comes from your hips being able to rotate through before your shoulders do. So like your throwing sequence when you throw the ball, it should be weight loaded on your back leg. That's the first part. Second part should be a short front stride. But as you have that short front stride, what you should be doing is getting into your backstroke, which is essentially a slight rotation with your front shoulder. They call this hip and shoulder dissociation. Shoulders are going back, front foot's going down, hips are going through. The lower body is separate from the upper body. So you got base, you got stride, then you got hips firing through. But when you take that stride, those shoulders got to go back. Now, you're going to do the same motion just about every time with the upper half. But if this front foot's taking forever to get down, when it does make contact, your shoulders are going to be open like this. So what's going to end up happening is your base is going to be wide, so you won't be able to rotate anyways, but your shoulders are going to be ripping through way before your back hip, your back leg, your pivot through, because we have wrong timing of the foot strike. There's really no such thing as an overstride. It's more so like wrong timing. So if you don't believe me, let's look at the last motion, right? That's what I'm talking about. You want the hip to go through before the shoulders do. So check this out. He has the same type of motion as Anthony Richardson, but the only difference is this guy, Anthony Richardson's foot is down when he is here. This guy's foot, and again, he's young, he's got time to fix it. This guy's foot doesn't get down until he's here. opening up, shoulder opening up. So watch what ends up happening. Elbow and shoulder are both ahead of his back hip. And his back hip isn't even rotating because the stride made his feet so wide. So not only does it put pressure on your arm, that's going to honestly limit power eventually because you're not using your hips properly. Let's look at Anthony Richardson's motion. Where is that elbow and that shoulder when that hip goes through? See how it's trailing behind, shoulder behind, elbow behind this back hip. And that is all because that front foot got down quickly, his shoulders stayed back. So fellas, it's not just about the power thing. It's not just about the arm pain, and it's not just about overuse on your arm. It's also about being able to generate power effectively. Because now that he's rotating with his hips, guess what he doesn't have to do? He doesn't have to dip his head. He doesn't have to pull his shoulder out of there. Now, you might ask me, well, coach, why is dipping your head and pulling your elbow down bad? Because that affects your release point. Your release point, like your body's divided down a midline. If you're not rotating at your hips, you rotate up here. But what's attached to the upper half? Your arm and the football. So if your head is dipping this way, your arm's going this way. Whatever the left side of your body does, the right side does the opposite, right? So this head goes here, shoulder goes there, arm widens, your sidearm. Suddenly you're missing right. Suddenly you're missing left. This front elbow pulls down and you start to dip your head. Suddenly you're missing high. Suddenly you're missing low. But if you can keep your head steady and shoulders parallel to the target, it's going to feel really awkward if you're not using your hips though. So that's why it's all tied together. The whole body is connected in this element because you got to stay stable up here, but you can't stay stable up here if you're not using the lower half. And that all ties into stride length, base, and being able to rotate. Okay, fellas? So that's honestly like your biomechanical sequence in a nutshell. That's why that overstride is such a problem for younger quarterbacks. You guys don't want to get in this bad habit because it is so hard to fix if you have thousands upon thousands of reps. Now, here's another thing. Quarterbacks at this young age, it's honestly kind of the same idea mechanically what this will do to you, but it's like a different starting point. They will be too wide with their feet because they lack strength in their legs. This is why I think it's very, very important for quarterbacks to get on like a quarterback-specific lifting program. And if you guys would like a quarterback-specific lifting program, just post that in the comment section below. I'll send you over something that we got specifically for quarterbacks. But a lot of quarterbacks, obviously, and especially at this age, it's totally normal. I'm not saying quarterbacks at this age should lift either. Like if you don't want to lift, like if you know, maybe your parents are hesitant on it, maybe your parent listening to this, you don't want to have your kid lift, that's totally fine. You could do body weight exercises, but you need to have, and this is again, a lot of people out there think that at this age, you shouldn't even be specializing in a position. I disagree with that. I think football gets competitive every year, and if a kid loves quarterback, he should play quarterback, right? But a lot of people don't think that like mechanically you're not strong enough at this age to do the correct thing. So you're just going to develop bad habits and put a lot of pressure on your arm and your elbow. Now, I do agree with that in the fact that if you're doing bad habits over and over again, it's going to be a habit. It's going to be just a way you throw the ball. It's going to be inefficient. So a lot of quarterbacks at this age, because they lack the leg strength to balance underneath their shoulder frame, they throw like this, where you see how his feet are crazy wide. So that's no different than the overstride. Your stride is getting down faster, but guess what? You ain't going to be able to rotate from this position. So watch what happens to this quarterback's front leg. See how it locks out and it hyperextends? How many of you guys, if you're younger quarterbacks or have been a younger quarterback, have had this problem? Probably a lot of you. And that's because you cannot support the rotation from the hips when you are that wide. You cannot, and so that's why it locks out. And guess what he's doing to get the ball there? He's dipping his head, pulling the elbow down. Guys, you got to understand that this is such a bad habit to get into at such a young age, because you're so, at a young age, like your body is so like impressionable. Like you do this type of motion over and over again because you're new to the position. Just because of your age, it develops so many bad habits long term. This is why so many guys have the lean in high school. That's why so many guys lock out when they're 7th, 8th grade, because they've been doing something wrong their whole life and they haven't been coached properly on it. So fellas, what you need to do is you need to strengthen your legs. You need to do body weight squats. You need to attach a resistance band around your ankles and press out as you're doing squats. You need to do body weight lunges, something that's going to strengthen your legs so you have a balanced frame where your feet can stay inside of your shoulders. With the quarterbacks that I train at this age, I do a lot of one leg like hops. So what I'll have them do is I'll have them go for 10 yards. I'll have them stand just on their right foot and I have them hop for 10 yards, and they hate it because it burns like crazy and it's super painful in a good way, but it's strengthening their legs to be balanced, to have that stability. And it's a body weight exercise so they can be comfortable with their feet not in, like, because a lot of guys are just super comfortable in this position. They're not even trying to be in this position. They're just comfortable because they feel more balanced and stable because they lack the strength in their legs and their ankles. So fellas, we cannot get to this wide base problem. It's the same thing mechanically. You're not using your hips, you're just using your arms. Here's an example from Bryce Young. Look where that back foot is. You see how it's underneath his frame. His shin is straight. His weight is loaded on his back leg. And watch what he does with the front stride. Stepping almost downward. Guys, it's all the same. You see all these top NFL quarterbacks, they all throw the ball differently, but what they do have in common is that base, that stride, and the timing of their hips firing through. And I don't care what size quarterback, what type of quarterback, they all have that somewhat thing in common. All right, fellas, really want to thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. If you guys have any questions at all, don't hesitate to leave those in the comment section below. Always appreciate the feedback. Always great to hear from you guys. And again, fellas, if you would like to come out and train with us in 15 different states across the country, check out that very first link in the description below. We'd love to have you out to one of our off-season training camps all the way from San Francisco. That camp is completely sold out, and all of these will sell out. So very first link in that description below. I would love to see you guys out there. See you guys next time.